Hey everyone, it's Bernard Nomberg in Birmingham with the Nomberg Law Firm, and we have compiled a series of questions and answers that deal with workers' compensation in Alabama and the COVID-19 or coronavirus that is currently a pandemic. And we want to go over a series of questions and hopefully some answers to provide to people so they'll have some information that they may need to be able to be a little bit less stressed, hopefully. So please bear with me for a few minutes, and if you have questions or concerns as I go through this, just put it in the comments section and I'll be glad to address any of them that may pop up. First question is, what happens when an employer sends its employees home for several weeks out of a general concern for the safety and prevention of the virus spreading? Must an employer pay for workers' compensation benefits? The answer to that is no for this particular limited question, but the employee might be entitled to unemployment benefits. There has to be a diagnosis, there has to be a connection to work activity and so forth. In these type of cases, someone being diagnosed with COVID-19, it's a very difficult case to prove, but we'll keep working through these questions and answers and maybe we'll be able to address some of that. What if an employer advises an employee that he or she must be quarantined because the employee might have been exposed to someone at work who has the coronavirus? Must the employer pay work comp benefits? Again, the mere possibility of injury or occupational disease is not sufficient in work comp in Alabama. So the answer to that limited question would be no, there would be no benefits available then. What if the government shuts down the company for a period of time and the company itself, let's see here, let me make sure I read it right, that the company has to send everyone home for a period of time and there's no work available to be able to work from home? Again, would work comp benefits be available? No. But the employee may be entitled to unemployment compensation. And if you've seen what we've posted in the last couple of days and in the news, the Department of Labor in Alabama has created very specific guidelines to make it a little bit easier for people to apply and receive unemployment compensation. And I'll repost that if I can in the show notes here in a few minutes. Next question. What if an employee becomes worried that they have symptoms similar to that of the coronavirus and they refuse to come to work and self-quarantine for 14 days, but no one at the work in this scenario has been diagnosed or been exposed at all? Again, does this then create an obligation to pay work comp benefits? Again, all of these, so far these questions, the answer is still no, because the mere possibility of an injury or an exposure of occupational disease is not enough to trigger work comp benefits. Along that same line, suppose the employer finds out that someone in the office, their child had been overseas, where a number of people had been exposed and deaths in that country that they had been, and then the employer advises somebody in HR that they must quarantine for 14 days or work comp benefits due. Again, the mere possibility of exposure or injury doesn't yet trigger work comp benefits. I want to say hey to Aaron Nelson. Thank you for joining, bud. Hope you're doing well, and I appreciate you spending a minute with me. Got a few more questions that we're going to go down here. Now here's a real scenario. What if you've got a work office share component where you have two different employees using the same office, but they have different shifts? One works what we'll call the AM shift and one works the PM shift. And let's say that one of them develops some symptoms that may be that they feel like they might have the coronavirus. In fact, they don't tell anybody. Then the next employee works the second shift, the PM shift, and now the first one has already gone into quarantine, self-quarantine, if you will, can either of the people there be eligible for work comp benefits? Well, again, is there a diagnosis? If there's no diagnosis, then there's no possibility of there being work comp benefits. But for that second employee to have been exposed to the first employee's symptoms, if it's something was hanging around when they worked there, there is the chance under the Alabama Work Comp Act that there could be work comp benefits. Maybe not for that first employee, because we don't have the origin or know where the diagnosis or how they became contagious or susceptible to the condition for the first employee, the one who worked the AM shift, but the second one might be. Again, you have to track it down, and that's what's so difficult for these. And you have to also show that the hazards of working at the place of employment is in excess of what's ordinarily out in the everyday world. It has to be tied back to the employment setting for it to be potentially compensable. Now, in order for COVID-19 or any type of similar viruses, even the flu and other types of conditions to be compensable in Alabama, the employee would have to be able to prove that contracting it was due to the hazards of in excess of those ordinarily incident to the employment in general, and that it's particular to the employee's occupation. Again, those are very specific guidelines, and that's what makes these types of cases, not just COVID-19, but any other type of similar infectious type conditions, so difficult to prove in an Alabama workers' compensation case. Let's see if there is. The other thing I was going to say is that in other states, unfortunately Alabama is not one of them, in other states they have laws where there's a presumption for health care workers or first responders in this type of scenario, but we don't have that statutory presumption to help out employees, and so it wouldn't be there. Now let's look at two more scenarios. And again, if you guys have questions or comments about this, please holler at me either now or later on. What if you have a hospital floor nurse who's working for the past month with patients who've tested for possible coronavirus? So far, all the tests in this scenario have been negative, but the nurse is diagnosed with coronavirus herself and becomes seriously ill and is hospitalized. She then files for work comp benefits for her lost time, medical bills, etc. Is she entitled to work comp benefits? Again, previous answers still hold. Just because someone's diagnosed with the condition and they happen to be at work doesn't automatically trigger work comp benefits. You've got to be able to show a connection that that's the source of where it came from. It's a very difficult scenario to prove here. Let's see. Let's say in the last scenario that I've got to share here is given that tens of thousands of employees, let's see, I want to make sure I read it correctly, the scenario, tens of thousands of employees are now working from home in Alabama, and more to come, including people who work in our office. Most everybody's telecommuting and doing so quite ably. And what if an employee gets hurt at home and files a work comp claim? Would they be entitled to work comp benefits? Well, the Comp Act doesn't specifically address telecommuter or home-based workers, and there's just not a lot of cases out there that give us much guidance, because this is, at least in Alabama, maybe not in other states, but in Alabama it's a fairly new thing over the last 10 or 15 years of doing that. Now, what other states have done is they have distinguished telecommuters from individuals who may just happen to be performing work at home on a particular given day. In those states, once it's established that the employee and the employer have entered into an agreement where the employee will work or telecommute arrangement, the hazards of the home are then taken into consideration to be workplace hazards. Now, written telecommunicating agreements that dictate the hours of employment, the area of the house. There's all kind of things that go into make up that agreement that would be part of the analysis here. But there are some very real scenarios. Just take any scenario that might be in a work office setting, and if that happened to occur in the home and person gets hurt, in our scenario here in Alabama, they potentially could seek work comp benefits. But that's a different scenario than someone who is exposed to the coronavirus. Well, anyway, those are about 7-8 different scenarios that I wanted to address. If you guys have questions or concerns about any of this, always reach out to David or me. We'll be glad to help find answers for you. We're at 205-930-6900, nomberglaw.com. And thank you, and we hope that you guys are doing the right thing. You're being smart. Practice social distancing. That may be one of the words or the terms of the year, but everyone is learning the new normal. So y'all be well and have a good weekend. Bye.